Do you think life is simpler as time evolves? For some, it can be more complicated when facing issues about health, estate plans, probate, long-term care, and more. That's why Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell hosts ElderTalk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future. Here's Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell.
Welcome to another episode of ElderTalk. This week we're going to talk about some of the challenges relating to retirement. Now, not that there could be any challenges relating to retirement.
Oh, never.
Isn't that a piece of cake?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we intend to make it maybe not quite a piece of cake, but something at least edible. In other words, something that you can understand it'll be useful. So we have with us a guest that those of you who watch this show regularly, you know our guest. We've had him on before, very popular. He's an authority on financial matters, certified financial planner, financial advisor, retirement consultant. So we want to talk this week about some news that had come out relating to Social Security and Medicare. Do you want to introduce our guest properly?
Yes, I would be happy to. We have John Gallia from Gallia Wealth Management. Thank you for coming back on the show. So how are things going since you were last on the show? I think it's been, about 6 or 7 months.
About 6 months, yeah. Things have been going really well, especially in the markets. I think everybody that listens to the show kind of knows that we're at all-time highs. Consumer confidence is pretty good when it comes to financial investing. So I got to say, things have been going really well. And, the weather here in St. Louis has been wonderful, too. So you couple that with people now going out and being able to live their lives again, as well as having a good financial market, things have been really good this summer.
Have you seen a lot of your clients retiring lately?
I would say there's been a little bit more flux in retirement just because the accounts, their investment accounts, have been going so well.
So much higher. They must be 30% higher than they were a year and a half ago.
Absolutely. At least 25, but 30, you're right there. If you follow the S&P 500, we just keep pinching ourselves. How much more can this go? And people are at a point where they feel comfortable enough to retire. And I think
real estate
great.
helps too, right? Their houses, if they own real estate, their houses are worth more than they've ever been.
Everything is worth more. Cars are worth more. Housing. Let's put it this way: when it comes to looking at those kind of topics, we have to put it in perspective. Supply is down. We haven't recovered from COVID as far as getting supplies, getting computer chips for our cars.
The GM plant.
Exactly, the Ford plants that are shut down. So that's driving the prices of used cars. It's driving the prices of home sales, used or not new homes, up because building materials are hard to find.
Yeah.
Wood, my goodness, lumber.
Exactly.
Lumber came down, but you're right, it's still an issue. And this whole supply chain issue, I think, though, cannot be sufficient to explain all this. I think that the Fed's theory, though, is that this phenomenon, the reason they argued that this inflationary binge that we've had recently, or this spike, is transient, is that they say, well, it's all supply chain related, and very quickly the world's supply chain processes will get caught up. But they were saying that in February, and so here we are, March, April, May, June, and then we're in, soon we'll be in October.
Yeah.
So it's not looking like we're looking at any sort of simple supply chain issue. I wonder if inflation's going to be with us for a while. Or what are you telling your clients about the prospect of inflation over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, in this past year, we've seen 5.5% inflation, which is quite substantial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, historically, it's very unusual.
Exactly. So a healthy rate of inflation is about 2%. It's healthy to have 2% inflation rate. We have to be cautious of this, especially when we're buying fixed income investments with inflation going up. We know that through monetary policy, the Fed can change interest rates.
On a dime.
On a dime, right, and help add more money to the market or take money out of the system, which will affect inflation. So we have to be leery of long-term investments with rising interest rates that we know that the price may drop in a couple of years for bonds, once interest rates rise. So we got to be leery of that. There is a supply chain issue, but I'm also interested in seeing what industries will be effective once the supply comes back. We look at grocery store prices, the cost of food. You wouldn't think that might be a supply chain issue, but it's scary. We're seeing food rise in cost at a rate that's ridiculous. We're at a point, the old saying, no use crying over spilled milk. Well, now there's a reason to cry over spilled milk.
Well, and it's more than just supply chain. My wife and I were recently in Hilton Head, and we saw this big sign posted in front of a local grocery store. It's like an IGA, I think. And it said, hiring for all positions. So that means mainly people who are unskilled, but people who could operate a cash register or people who can stock.
Sure.
You know what they're paying?
Oh, probably $16, $17 an hour.
$20 an hour.
You're kidding me.
$20.
That's unheard of.
I know, and this is where the cost of living is pretty low. This is Hilton Head, South Carolina. So it's not like it's California.
Right.
$20 an hour.
I know my daughter just got a job at a restaurant in our area, a well-known one. Starting pay, $16 an hour. Have you ever heard of a high school student making that kind of money?
No. Not at all.
And it's got to be affecting products. I mean, going back to the grocery store and restaurants are a good example, but they've got to be raising prices.
They have to.
And I
to
get
pay
it.
that rate, sure.
But I think that consumers are willing to pay more. I've seen a couple of people in a few different industries over the last couple months comment that, we're passing the prices along and our customers don't seem to mind. So it appears that consumers are so motivated to purchase that there's such demand in so many different industries, so many products that we don't care too much about the price.
No. Well, you remember the toilet paper shortage? You found toilet paper and maybe it was a brand that you normally didn't buy. It was a more expensive brand, but you needed that toilet paper. You bought it and you didn't care what you paid for it, or Lysol.
Right. And it really kind of shows you what our culture is developing into. If we want something, we're going to go out and get it. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the confidence in maybe our money in our wallet right now, with things going really good as far as corporate earnings. The stock market returns have been really well.
Employment opportunities for anybody that want them.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's more help wanted signs in windows that I've ever seen in my life right now. So, I mean, it's remarkable.
But why are we still seeing a worker shortage? Because here in Missouri, the governor took away that extra pay with unemployment. So you would think you would see more people going back to work.
As of yesterday, I think it expired everywhere. So people who are watching this show, today is what, the 8th? September 8th, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, it just expired. So we're going to see the effects in some other states. But you're right. There have been, I think, 30 states that had chosen not to take the latest round of unemployment. Yeah,
it really is amazing. And you got to think that there were a lot of people that were using those benefits to stay at home. There's a lot of folks that may have kids, or, they just don't have the education to land a really, really high-paying job. So they're going to take their stimulus checks and they're going to take their unemployment checks over going out in the workforce and finding something new. So I think that's a cultural choice of why we've seen the workforce kind of diminish. And I also think that people are choosier to what kind of jobs they are willing to work.
Well, too, there's a lot more work-at-home jobs that have been created since the pandemic. We're seeing that more and more. And I think people think, well, you know what? I want to work from home.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I do believe that once this money, this latest round of it, this latest extension of unemployment, I think that people will come back in bigger numbers. I think they'll have to. And that'll help a lot of these lower-end positions. It doesn't solve the problems at the top. At Cordell & Cordell, I know that they're struggling to keep lawyers and to hire lawyers. It's such a competitive environment. And I know this is true of all professionals, not just lawyers. But
sure.
But I can tell you that compensation for lawyers is just going up. And it's frustrating, but what do? You're left with a dilemma if you own a business. You either try to limp along with keep your customers. In other words, you keep the doors open, you continue to service the same volume that you did before, but you have either a lower number of employees or a lower quality of employees or both, but you still try to keep going along as you did before. I think that that's a recipe for disaster long term, but it happens. I was talking to someone this morning who had been to a nice restaurant in Chesterfield just this weekend. And this is a restaurant that they had gone to in the past, and it had been wonderful. So they go, and the food is bad, and the service is bad. And this person whose judgment I respect as a critic of restaurants, because she actually managed nice restaurants.
Right.
So she said that you could just tell the waiters, they had no experience. They looked a little rough, and they were, meaning they just didn't know what they were doing. And meanwhile, the chef didn't know what he was doing, he or she, because they had turnover and are still having turnover. But that business owner strategy was, I'm going to try to keep the same revenue coming in. And that's a disaster, because this person I was talking to, I think, reflects a lot of people who go to that restaurant. And she said, I'm not going back.
Oh, sure.
And incidentally, they ended up giving them comping them some of their meals, but it still didn't compensate for the fact that you have this really bad experience lodged in your head.
Sure.
So my point is that I think businesses that are in this position, I know Cordell and Cordell's position is this: if we can't properly staff a law office, we quit taking appointments. And we're in that position in a couple cities where you just have to say, people call you and say, I'd like to make an appointment. And our people just say, look, I'm sorry, we can't take new clients right now. That's better than taking the new clients.
Them having a negative experience.
Yeah.
Because then that reflects on the company.
But there is another strategy that I think we're seeing with a lot of companies out there, and I bet our listeners have seen this. And that's where the company just decides, look, I want to keep the same volume of business, so I'm going to increase by 10%, 15, 20% the wages and pass it on, put it on the menu, charge more money. And I think customers pay it. And this person I was talking to, I said, so what if they had increased their compensation 20, 25% and they increased the prices of their meals 20, 25%? Would you have complained, or would you have been unhappy with that? She said, no, I'd much rather do that. She said, I understand that.
Right.
She said, I get it, because everybody's having to do that right now, so I kind of expect it. So I think that we'll see that all throughout our economy is businesses saying, I'm going to pay these people more because I have to, but I'm going to raise all my prices. And then that's where it feels like you get into this spiral of inflation.
Right. And it's going to happen on every industry. We have the trucking industry that's can't find drivers.
Sure.
So supply chain. The other night, and I'm guilty of this, I stopped by Taco Bell. I was so hungry. The Taco Bell by my house was closed. And there was a sign that said, due to staffing, we are closed
You're
tonight.
seeing that everywhere.
You know, it's probably the lesser evil, though.
Yes,
you know, if they can't staff.
Yeah, and you know, so I drove to a different Taco Bell because I was craving it.
Had to have that burrito.
I had to have it, but
my wife's that way with, what's the chicken place? Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A,
Yeah.
yes.
You're seeing things like that happen, and you know, that's if Taco Bell or fast food raises the minimum wage or whatever they're paying to $20-25 an hour, I'm not going to be able to get a $2 burrito. I mean, that's going to be a $4 or $5 burrito now.
So let's assume this continues for the next, I mean, it's not at all unreasonable that we would go through a period of inflation that may last 5 or 6 years. So what do you tell somebody who's in your office and saying, gee, I want to go into retirement now. Things are good. My portfolio's up. My real estate's up. So I'm worried about inflation, though, eating up the income that I expect to get from, say, my 401k.
Sure. That's a big scare for most people. So, you know, typically what I will tell them is, number one, we have to look at your whole financial plan. Let's look at maybe some areas in your financial plan where you're spending money that maybe we can do something different to help you save money, right? Ben Franklin, penny saved is a penny earned. So if I can earn you 5%, isn't that as good as saving you 5%? So let's look at your whole plan and see where there's little leaks coming out financially that maybe we can pull back the reins and retain some of that money to help combat inflation. So that's the first, advice that I have is let's look at the whole picture. There's only so much we can do with your investments, but let's look at everything else, your tax situation, your insurance situation. Maybe there's a policy that you're paying for, a high premium that you don't need anymore. that maybe was correct 10 years ago when you had kids that you
Right.
were in your house that you were paying for. Finding little gaps like that is pretty important. Also looking at refinancing some of your debt, maybe taking advantage of some of these lower interest rates right now. And that can be a car, that can be a home, but you need to look at how you're leveraged financially to help combat inflation.
Do you look at some sort of investment allocation where it's an industry that tends to do well, inflation, companies, maybe an index that you think would be able to offset the inflation?
A lot of people think of, precious metals. Dollar goes down, inflation, we have uncertainty, we're going to go buy gold, we're going to go buy silver. Let me tell you, if you're that kind of investor, I'm not going to try to talk you into doing it or out of doing it. But I will tell you, if you look at your blue chip value stocks or ETFs, the ones with the mega cap or the large cap, they're going to adjust for inflation. The price of Johnson & Johnson or Pepsi or Coke, these major firms, the price of that individual security will adjust with inflation. Now, yes, you do have to worry about the fundamentals of the company, but if it's worth $1 today and inflation goes up to $2, that company should verbatim fall in line if nothing's wrong financially. So I would look at, if you're looking for an inflation hedge with your investments, number one, you can't necessarily reallocate toward bonds because we know one thing, that doesn't keep up with inflation, but look at large cap value.
Yeah. And, Warren Buffett has said something similar to that. He said that he only, as people have heard him say before, he only invests in things he understands. So he doesn't look for...
That's good advice.
Yeah. He doesn't look for the unicorns. He doesn't look for these growth stocks where, your PE ratio is 100 to 1, but you think that eventually it's going to make money down the road. But it's a very high-tech, innovative concept. Not that that's bad. There are people who obviously have been, can pick those and have become billionaires. But I really like Warren Buffett's approach. His approach is kind of like similar to what you said. Keep it simple. He says, I invest in cyclical things that have a recurring need that would keep up with inflation, as you described. He didn't mention it in the context of inflation, but if he had heard what you just said, it would be exactly his philosophy.
Sure.
So, he would point to food companies,
Right.
Standard things that you're seeing on grocery store shelves, General Mills, things you see on grocery store shelves. And those things, I think you would predict would, for the most part, keep up with inflation.
Yeah, I agree. And, a lot of times with these large cap core companies, the General Mills, the Pepsis, the Johnson & Johnsons, these are the guys that are paying good dividends and interest, or good dividends on a quarterly basis. And Einstein said the eighth wonder of the world is compounding interest. And that's true. Reinvesting those dividends over time and buying shares when the price is low or high, it doesn't matter. It just compounds itself, and there's really no replacement for that. It's an excellent investment strategy.
That's a very good point. The very stocks we're talking about are the ones that do pay the most dividends. So even in the absence of dividends, I thought, well, gee, these are ones to keep up with prices. But these are the stocks that are paying dividends, not the growth stocks. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. So you can buy Tesla, but don't count on it for dividends.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And John, we've talked on the show before about new retirees, the first years of retirement. People like to travel, of course. And I love the way he describes the phases of retirement, go, slow go, and no go.
Right.
So are you, because of these issues, are you advising clients to maybe, not do so much traveling right now with the uncertainty, or what are you telling them?
Really, what I look at is you have to work at your financial plan. You have to work at anything that is important in your life in general. Have that be relationships with spouses or kids. Have that be your health. You have to exercise. You have to eat right. You have to work at it. You have to work at being financially healthy too. So that means taking a conscientious approach to where you're at financially with your budget and your income. So before I start traveling, before I start these adventures, I want to know, what is this regular trip of $5,000 a year going to do to me 10 years down the road? So I want to be able to lay this out and see what I can afford, and then make my choices from there. So the big thing is yes, you can travel, you can plan these things, but you have to know how they're going to affect you down the road.
Long term. Okay.
Long term.
That makes sense.
But, do you think people, though, err on the side of scrimping a little too much, being a little too tight-fisted in terms of their standard of living or the things they permit themselves in the early years versus the later years? This topic has come up on this show a couple times in the last several months, where we are talking about the subject of retirement, and there's this tendency of people to say, gee, what if I live to be 100 and, oh my gosh, I'm going to run out of money? So at the time when they really are mobile, when they're most ambulatory, they can go and do things, and they have these dreams.
Waited their whole lives.
Sure.
Yeah. Instead, they're retired in their 60s, let's assume, mid-60s, and they spend the first 5 or 10 years, trying to hoard those dollars, just trying to be extremely economical.
Right.
And so here they get to 75, and maybe they're starting to develop some more confidence that, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And maybe 80. And so they say, now perhaps we should start really enjoying life. But, when you wait that long,
You don't know what's going to happen health-wise.
yeah.
And we're assuming it takes money to enjoy life.
Well, yeah,
Well,
you're
yeah.
right. Now, that's a
Right.
good point. It may be
Right.
that that the things that they would really want to do are cheap.
It could be.
It could be,
A
but often they're
staycation.
not. Often they're not.
And I will say, with somebody going into retirement, it's a lot of a mental aspect of preparing for retirement. You think that it takes money to retire, for me to be happy in retirement, but I think it's important to do soul searching. See, what will make you happy in retirement. If it's just having a purpose or doing something you're passionate about, you may be able to do that at relatively no cost or low cost.
Now, this is an interesting pitch. We've not heard this argument. No, really, it is.
It
It's
is.
a novel, and it's worth considering is whenever we've talked about this before, we've assumed that doing the things you want to do takes a lot of money. And you're suggesting, well, wait, maybe not. Maybe you don't need that expensive cruise to
Right.
enjoy yourself or to fulfill a dream.
Absolutely. And it's more of a philosophical question than it is a financial question, but
Maybe it's a moral question.
exactly.
But
Where are
it
your
goes hand in
priorities?
hand.
Yeah.
It really does.
Exactly. But, let's say you're in a situation and you've met with a financial planner, and it's going to be tough to retire. You're going to have to cut your costs. You know it. That's the kind of thing that I would wrap. All right, you can still retire, but let's redefine your retirement, what that looks like, what makes you happy, what makes you happy right now, what would you like more of in your life? Hopefully it's not limited to traveling and experiences.
Sure.
Hopefully it's, being with family, being healthy, getting the outdoors.
A hobby.
A hobby, exactly. So, that's something that people need to soul search and look for prior to retiring, so that can help their plan.
And there are cheap adventures, to the extent you want activity in your younger years. Let's assume that we'll take it as a good value to say that it's good to go and do when you can. So let's assume whatever that is, the go and do, that pretty much most people will have dreams that will require that, or ambitions or hopes. There are ways you can do that inexpensively. I mean, there are walking trips where you go on and you go with groups, and
Right.
they often involve tours, but these are inexpensive. And I know people who rent like a small RV and take. Now that's
Sure.
not
Yes.
that's your taste.
No, I'm saying I know people that do the same thing.
Okay, to me that doesn't sound interesting at all. But I have to tell you, I have a couple of friends
Yeah.
who think it's the coolest thing in the world, and I'll tell you this: it is pretty inexpensive.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't want to drive that thing.
Yeah, and it's pretty close quarters.
Right.
You know? So you're going to be with whoever you go with in pretty close quarters for a while. So
yeah, and you can't park it outside of Rich. You're going to be parking it in a trailer park.
Yeah.
I say trailer park. That's not fair. Some sort of
campground.
RV. Campground.
Right. And if you need some place to stay at night, you're going to be in a Walmart parking lot until you get to your place, which, it's either for you or not. But no, there are ways, especially with this Airbnb stuff that's happening, that you can find, some place that's a little bit more comforting than a hotel room, that you can stay for a while, that you're left alone, that's home-like. So there's ways to make things a little bit more affordable.
And to have an adventurous lifestyle.
Sure.
Without spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely, in retirement, finding something that you're passionate about doing that doesn't cost a lot of money is going to be advantageous for anybody.
So what do you tell people they should plan on, though, in terms of longevity? I mean, the number you plug in is going to indicate, I suspect, how much you pull out of your fund. For example, one approach, let me fill people in real briefly, is that while it's true that you can just live on interest or income of some sort, that's going to really reduce your standard of living if you say, I'm going to leave principal alone. And not to mention, if you have inflation, the value of those fixed dollars go down. So I suspect that you do suggest that this be treated more like an annuity where you set some number of years you want it to pay out.
Yeah, and there's a lot of folks, and we'll kind of go into annuities here because I think that's a good segue. There's a lot of folks that are not big believers in annuities, and there's other folks that are big believers.
It's a controversial subject.
Yeah, but let's look at it this way. Let's say I'm a spender and I know it, and I'm getting close to retirement and I have an extra $100,000 or $200,000. Well, I have a couple options. One, I can put that in an annuity and get an income for life, really create my own pension.
And that's pretty secure, right?
It's secure. It will last my lifetime. I mean, you have to buy certain riders for this thing, and I don't like getting into specific products, but, it will last my lifetime, and as long as I stay within the 5% it's allowing me to take out over a number of years, I'm okay for life. That account can go to zero, and I'm not going to outspend my money.
So it guarantees to pay out a certain amount for life.
It guarantees that. Now, let's say I'm a spender, I can go that route, or I can leave that money in my 401k and grow it, or my IRA. But if it's there, I think I'm going to spend it.
It'll be too tempting.
It'll be too tempting to take out more than 4 or 5% per year. And next thing you know, I end up taking more and more out. Next thing you know, that income just bought a bunch of stuff that's kind of worthless that I don't need now, and I don't have that income for life.
Well, it's good that we're touching on this because it is a controversial subject. And my ambivalence on this topic is, on the one hand, I see the merit of your argument, and I do see the value of something that guarantees to pay every year for the rest of your life. So that's good. I mean, it means that you don't have to calculate exactly, are you going to live 30 years? Are you going to live 40 years, 20 years? And incidentally, a new refinement of these plans, as I understand it, is that if you end up dying real soon, you can even have a rider or something where there's a payback of some sort. So it's not as if a forfeiture if you buy this policy and the next day you get hit by a bus.
Yeah, not at all. The majority work that way.
Yeah, the majority. So, but here, so on the one hand, I think it's a great idea. The concept is marvelous. The reason that I have hesitation is that often the costs associated with some of the options out there, some of the products, are very expensive. I mean, the annuities, and whether it's on the commission side or whatnot, how do you find a product that is not going to be heavily loaded with those costs?
Any kind of income for life rider is going to cost you about 1% or 1.5% on top of an annuity that might have a mortality and exchange, M&E charge of 1% or 1.5%. So you might be paying for some of these annuities 2.5% to 3.5%. And basically what you're buying is that income for life benefit. So there are products out there that won't offer as many benefits, maybe not that income for life, that's much cheaper, But the big thing is if you do buy something like that, you don't have all your eggs in one basket. You have, all right, I'm going to generate another $10,000 a year every year of my life for the remainder of my life. Plus, I have these other funds that I need in case I need it in some other way, shape, or form. I have a medical problem or I need cost of living.
So you're saying this is an option with a particular annuity, or are you saying that you take some portion of your total funds, retirement funds, and you buy an annuity with it, then you take the other portion and set aside for these other things?
Absolutely, yeah. You split up your investment accounts and maybe a portion you put into something that's going to give you an income for life. Yes, you're going to pay a little bit higher in fees, but you're guaranteeing an income for life.
It's a safety net.
It's a safety net. It's no different than, all right, a corporate pension or a government pension. They've taken money out of your retirement account or out of your salary and paid into your retirement for that pension. You're, in all essence, doing the same thing. You're just creating your own pension. But you don't want to put all your money in there because you're going to need some for later on in life.
You might have a crisis of some sort.
You might have a crisis. And you got to remember with some of these products, they only allow you to take out 4 or 5% per year for the remainder of your life. If you take out more than that, you kind of destroy the product.
So I still want to come back and press again this question. So can you find products, though, that are less commission rich?
Yes, you can absolutely. There's annuities out there that you will pay no commission. No upfront commission, no management fees.
So it's all actuarial calculation.
Exactly. You can buy something like that will pay you out over time. Now, what you give up when you buy something like that is the income for life benefit, right?
So what do you get then?
A lot of them downside market protection.
Oh, so you can't buy an annuity that guarantees income for life?
Without paying some sort of rider on that or fee on that.
Yeah, no, I expect to pay some commission. It's just that I think that the controversy, those who are harshly critical, are not so much critical of the concept, because I think that'd be dumb to be critical of the concept. I mean, anybody who says the concept of buying an annuity where you have, which means simply a fixed amount of money that you receive every month, guaranteed no matter how long you live. That's what an annuity is. So while I guess it could technically be a fixed number of years, generally an annuity is an insurance company that's willing to take a risk and say, okay, you give me $100,000 and I'll guarantee you, $1,000 a month for the rest of your life or whatever the number is. So if you end up living this really long life, then they keep paying you. On the other hand, if you die early, you have to let them have some profit too. So they're kind of making a bet that could go either way on them. But when they distribute it over 1,000 people, it's okay. The odds, level out, their calculations. So I don't think anybody can say that's a bad concept for everybody.
Right. It's insurance.
I think
that's how insurance works.
I think the people who are critical of annuities, and I know some people are watching who may not understand anything about annuities, but they've heard people say, don't buy annuities. There are a few investment advisors, names that you might recognize. There are a few that are critical of annuities across the board, but what they're really saying is that they're critical of what they think are rich commissions that are associated with it. So the question is, and I'm asking, I guess, this maybe a little differently, can you get a guaranteed annuity for life that is less heavily loaded with commission? It's
going to be hard to find. I mean, there's an immediate annuity that, or period certains that are going to be less commission up front or trailing because you're plopping down that money and you're getting it right away, okay? And maybe there's a 10-year certain or a 5-year certain period that they're going to pay out those benefits. But if you don't have something like that, you're going to lose principal if you die sooner. So yes.
Yeah, it can go for you or against you.
It can go for you or against you. So would you rather pay the 2.5% or 3% and get something that is going to last your lifetime and your heirs have the ability to receive if something were to happen to you prematurely, or would you rather pay less commission, less yearly fees for something that's not going to guarantee your heirs having any money left?
And let me distinguish this because I want our audience to get this point and to be sure you and I are on the same page.
Sure.
So when I talk about commission, I'm talking about commission to the sales to the agent.
Yeah.
I understand that insurance, if they provide a guarantee, some sort of rider that says if you die early, we'll give you back your money. of course you pay for that. That has a value. It's a calculation based on actuarial math. So that I understand, but that's all arithmetic.
Right.
And then throw in another bit of profit for the company. I mean, the company's not a not-for-profit company, we'll assume.
Right.
And so, they deserve to make a little money. So the actuarial calculation is, what are the odds that you're going to die at a certain year? And then in addition, tack on 1% for the company to make profit. So all that's good. Good, of course. And I'm sure no one would, even the worst critics of annuities would not criticize that.
Yeah.
It's when you go beyond that and it's about the amount of commission that's being paid out to agents around the country. That's the issue.
Sure, and that's always been an issue. And I think that, the big thing that you can do if you're in that boat is, talk to whoever it is, if they're selling you an annuity, and ask them up front, how is it you get paid? And deeming it, is it still worth your while knowing that, a lot of times the annuity company pays that commission as a finder's fee to the advisor. It may not even be the client that's paying that upfront commission if there is any. Or it might be something to where, you plop it down and yes, the client is paying for that commission. So asking your advisor or your financial professional who you're talking to about this on how you get paid and seeing if it's still relevant and seeing if it's still in your best interest is probably the best advice I can get. And there's 1,000 products out there too. So as soon as I, say, yes, there's a product out there or no, there isn't, there's one that comes out that changes the ballgame, and that's forever changing. So that would be my advice, is to talk to somebody and just ask them to fully disclose how and if they're getting paid for this.
Now, the 2, 3, 4%, that's pretty typical. I mean, that's not unusual.
It's not unusual, no.
Okay. But any higher than that, that would raise red flags, that maybe you want to stay away from that?
From a product that's paying, it would have to have some ridiculous benefits or riders that would protect assets above and beyond my spending for me to pay more than 3% on an annual basis for a product like that.
So I wonder how they avoid adverse selection. And adverse selection is a problem when you sell insurance. All it means is whenever you offer any sort of insurance, the people who buy it are going to tend to be the people who benefit from it, meaning are likely to be sick, for example, if it's health insurance. So the rates are calculated across the population, assuming that you don't just have the people in the population who are sick who go out and buy insurance, but the people who aren't sick, so that the math works out, across 10,000 people. So anyway, back to this. So adverse selection, why wouldn't you have people who tend to think they're going to live, who may in fact know genetically or by their family trees that they're likely to live a long time? So it would seem like you would have a disproportionate number of people coming in who, if they're intelligent consumers, they would be more inclined to buy this, thinking that I'll be the one who goes above the average lifespan. And so you end up with 80% of the people buying your policy being people who are likely to live beyond the average lifespan, and the people who think they may not have as long a lifespan, to the extent this is predictable at all. And it's mildly predictable, a little bit. So those people would tend to say, no, I'm not going to buy an annuity based on lifetime because I'm going to pay for that assumption that I may very well not enjoy.
Right. Well, the one thing I will say to combat that is there's annuities now that can cover you and your spouse for your life, a joint payout option. So if you're in bad health and she's in great health, and you pass away 5 years from now, she's still going to get the remainder. She's still going to get that income for life benefit. So there's products out there that kind of combat that. But you're right. I mean, if you're in ill health now and you've had medical scares, and maybe your wife has had medical scares, and you look back in your family history and nobody lives to the age of past 70 years old,
right,
may not be a product for you. along with other insurance policies that you might have. It may not be optimal in your case. So you kind of got to factor that in as well.
So what factors do they look at when you're making application for an annuity? Do they look at your family history? Are they allowed to consider that? Or is it just age and gender?
They look at age, gender. I
assume they can still look at gender. Is that still permissible?
They still look at gender. They look at age, and they'll, if they're running numbers for you and a spouse, they'll look at the younger person's, longevity, and they'll come up with something. So it's never the older person that you get the rates on. It's always the younger person. They don't look at health.
They don't make you disclose any health issues then?
No.
Okay.
No. And,
that's interesting.
A lot of these products, too, they have some sort of payout to whoever it is, a spouse or a beneficiary, if you both die, and there's still money left in that contract, you haven't taken it all out, those heirs get that money. But, let's say something happens to you and your account is $100,000 and you put $100,000 in and you haven't taken any money out 2 years down the road, that company has gone on and invested your money in different ways and made a profit off your money. For a couple of years. So it's not a bad investment either way for an insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't we shift gears and talk about that report that came out about a week ago, the alarming report from the government about Social Security. The projections are that it's going to run out a year earlier in 2034 to where they can't pay out full benefits. Okay, John, can you give us a background and explain how this happened? How did we get into this mess?
Well, I think
might be a longer show.
Yeah, it might be. Well, you got to look back at kind of the origins of Social Security. Started in 1935, 34, somewhere in there. It was to help retirees or disabled people or survivors of folks that worked to help supplement their income in retirement. They saw that there was a need for that. The average person that was on Social Security back then lived another 10 or 15 years, approximately. Mm-hmm. Now we have folks that are living a lot longer that are claiming benefits, right? So that's a major issue. When the program first came out there, people were living a lot less longer. And retirement age was still 65, which isn't too far off from where we're at right now at 66, 67 years old.
And I hear that it was never intended to be anything more than supplemental.
That's absolutely right. In some way, shape, or form down the road, people decided that was going to be their number one means of retirement.
And we see that all the time, where that's how people survive on Social Security, as hard as it is to believe.
We see that, and, as a financial planner, I always tell people that same thing you just said, Joe. It was meant to be a supplement, and that's it. So let's take that out of your mind and let's aggressively fund your retirement, because what we're dealing with, according to that report, is insolvency, which the numbers aren't that, I guess, out of whack, or you could have predicted that over time. They're not surprising. It's just we've been concentrating something on a society that, COVID for the past 2 years, that we haven't had time to look at this. Well, now we've seen economic rebound, and now we have time to focus back on this major issue. So when we deal with insolvency, that doesn't mean that the program is broke. What that means is we won't have the funds coming in through payroll taxes to cover 100% of the benefits. And in 2034, what they're predicting is if everything stays the same as is, Social Security will be able to cover about 78% of benefits. So what does that mean? Something has to change. Either one, people are going to get a reduced Social Security benefit. Two, Social Security is going to owe you money once their reserves build back up.
And who knows how long that could take.
And who knows how long that's going to take. Or two, they change some kind of fiscal policy to make up for the shortage in reserves. And why do we have a shortage in reserves? Well, if we look at the funds that Social Security invests in, it's government funds, it's short-term, low interest rates, not yielding much, right? They're not helping pay off the added benefit that we don't get through taxation, number one. Number two, baby boomers are retiring at an alarming pace. You know, anybody that was born from 1946 to 1964 is considered a baby boomer. So they're retiring at a much more rapid pace, and the workforce is dwindling down.
Yeah.
So we don't have as many workers paying into the Social Security system
the fund, right,
than we do having folks retiring.
Yeah, and it was never actuarially sound. It was, at least after those early years. And so what it means is that we were always having to pull money from current contributors. But now it seems that current contributors, as a ratio of the people who are, you might say the people who are pulling versus those who are sitting in the back of the wagon, since that ratio is such now that they're having to bring dollars, as you say, from another source. You can't even the current contributions are not sufficient in order to meet these payout obligations. And incidentally, I think they've been timid about raising the retirement age. I think we're what are we working up to, 67?
Yeah, 67. I've had some folks retire recently, and it was 66 in 10 months. It's 67 for
I think
some.
it peaks. I could be wrong. I haven't looked at this in a long time, but I think it peaks at 67 or maybe 68. But the point is, it's a very politically volatile question, and I find it's true in other countries too. I read this. Was it Japan or China that had the same issue? And I think it's probably Japan. And they were just afraid to go up more than a year or two. So no matter what type of country you're in, even if it's not a democracy, the idea of raising the retirement age, which you think would be the easy solution, just say people are living longer, they need to work longer. That seems very reasonable to me. But let me tell you, in any country, when they think about that, it's a hugely unpopular issue. And so you see countries that have tried to tackle this question, they'll add a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, but really it needs to go up to reflect our lifespan, which probably now, as a ratio, let's assume 35. Oh, we won't even use that one because you're right. Back in 1935, it was probably in the 60s.
Right.
Yeah.
Late 50s, early 60s.
So we don't have to necessarily go up as much as we could, but certainly go up to 70, 71, 72. But I know that that's not likely to happen. But something like that could fix the problem.
Something like that could fix the problem. Something like increasing payroll taxes. You know, those are going to be two major choices that are not going to be popular choices, you know, and depending on the administration you have in office when that happens, I mean, that could hurt them for the next 4 years.
And those boomers are a big share of the vote.
They are the vote.
Right.
Yeah.
They are the vote. So there's been times where they've borrowed money from other trusts to help fund a shortage, but then you have to pay that back. So there is 1,000 ways that this problem could be fixed or at least get better. I think probably it's going to be very unpopular to cut benefits.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening.
I don't see that happening.
Unless for the wealthy. I think they could get away with that in this mood.
But, you know, I do see possibly the chance that payroll taxes could go up, that maybe there's, you know, you're capped out at about $150,000 on how much you pay in payroll taxes. If you make north of that, you don't have to pay anymore. That could go away. So there's 1,000 different ways that they could slice this and try to help the insolvency or push it back.
And I wouldn't think that this would be so alarming for your clients, since this is considered, you know, always has been considered supplemental, and your clients have created a financial plan. So they're not going to be relying on that Social Security check to live every month. I mean, these are more, I think it's more concerning for the folks who haven't created a financial plan and are just living on Social Security.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a demographic if they do cut benefits that it's going to affect more so than a different demographic. But I think if, you know, you're retired right now, there's not much you can do about the situation. Mm-hmm. But if you're pre-retirement or getting close to retirement, aggressively and proactively looking into kicking back more toward your personal retirement plan is going to be advantageous.
Yeah, especially if you're not retired now.
Right.
I mean, if you're still 10 years away, I think most people watch this show are probably 60 and above, but if you're 10 years away, I think you can't count on the same amount of money you'd otherwise get. Yeah, I think you're right. I want to hit on one other thing is apparently that this depletion date for Medicare trust, which just came to my attention in the last week or so.
That's coming up.
Yeah, and it estimated in 2026. So this means that the funds that are set aside to pay for health care, I would argue.
It's inpatient care, right?
Inpatient. The single most important benefit, I would argue, that's offered retirees in America and probably in the world is the health care plan.
Right. That could be devastating for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're looking at Medicare Part A, which is the hospital inpatient care that's being affected. Medicare Part B and C, which are largely funded by premiums paid by the individual.
People pay for that.
Yeah, they're not being affected. But Medicare Part A, basically what they're saying is by 2026, there will be enough funds to cover maybe 83 cents on the dollar for inpatient care.
At the current benefit level.
At the current benefit level. So, you run the risk of, number one, the government owing doctor's office or they're not able to pay on time, so they're going to extend payments over time, which would be terrible because what would doctors do or offices? They would no longer see Medicare patients because they're not going to get their money.
Which some don't do already.
Some don't do already. So the care could go down for folks that rely on Medicare, and it could cause a gap in the kind of care you're getting, which would be tragic.
Could be a bigger copay.
But one of the things that they haven't done is they haven't raised the portion of payroll taxes that go into Medicare since 1980. Okay, so about 2.5% to 3%, somewhere in there. Actually 2.9% of your payroll tax goes into Medicare. They could boost that up if they're also increasing your payroll taxes for other reasons.
They've certainly boosted Social Security contributions from employers as well as employee. And so I would think that would be a prime target.
I would think so too. I mean, having that rate not adjusted since 1980, especially with all the baby boomers, that you might be scratching your head and saying, all right.
Why hasn't this happened?
Why hasn't this happened? You're absolutely right. But I would venture to say if they do increase payroll taxes, then you're probably a portion of that is going to go toward increasing the Medicare.
I can see that. We've covered a lot of territory. We spilled over. But, this happens. We have you on the show. So we're out of time. We've covered a lot of territory. And these are critical issues that we need to come back and visit on. I mean, Social Security, Medicare, subject of annuities, inflation. I mean, these are probably among the most important questions that people who are retiring need to consider when they're developing a financial plan. So, John, you're always an excellent guest. We look forward to having you again. And it's John Gallia. And John, we'll put your contact information on the website.
Gallia Wealth Management.
Gallia Wealth Management.
Gallia Wealth Management. So we'll have John back again. This has been another episode of ElderTalk. Till next time, take care.
You've been listening to ElderTalk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future, with Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell. Sponsored by TuckerAllen, your estate and elder law advisors. For more information, visit TuckerAllen.com. Listen again next Saturday for another edition of ElderTalk with TuckerAllen. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.